I was driving home one night. I don't remember the exact time, but it was late. Where I live, once you're off the highway, it's basically all rural roads where you don't see another car for miles. No streetlights, just my headlights cutting through the dark. Then I saw her. At first I thought it was an animal, but as I got closer I realized it was a person. A woman kneeling on my side of the dirt road. She was rocking back and forth with her hands gripping her head. Again, just to remind you of the context, we are in the middle of absolutely nowhere. Something was very, very wrong. Her clothes were filthy and torn like she'd been crawling through the mud. Her hair was wet and matted, and her feet were bare and covered in scratches. As my headlights passed over her, she put her hands up as if to say, "Don't hurt me, I give up." I initially drove past her, looking on either side of the road for other people. I've heard too many horror stories of traps or setups where people are baited into life-threatening situations by their sympathies. But I saw nothing, so less than a quarter of a mile later, I turned around and went back. She was still there, collapsed in the road in the same place. As my headlights got closer to her, she appeared to attempt to crawl back into the woods, dragging herself, or attempting to, by her arms. I pulled up beside her and cracked my window just enough to be heard and asked her if she was okay. She turned toward me, and I'll never forget the way her face looked. She was crying, but there was no sound, just these big, panicked gasps. She looked absolutely terrified. She choked out these broken statements, begging for help and not to let him take her back. I threw my car into park and got out. She struggled to her feet, and I could see her legs shaking. She had also wet herself and could barely hold herself up. She reached out, grabbing onto my arm like it was the only thing keeping her from collapsing. I opened the passenger door and helped her in, telling her she was safe and that I would take her to the hospital. Then I saw the headlights. Another car was coming up behind us. My gut immediately told me this wasn't just some random driver. The timing was too perfect. I shut the passenger door and walked around to the driver's side, trying to act normal. The car rolled to a stop a few yards away. There were no license plates. The man who got out was clean-cut, maybe mid-40s, and dressed like someone who worked a regular job. He looked normal. He finally spoke and said good evening and thanked me for finding his wife. The woman in my car let out a stifled cry. I didn't look at her. I didn't want to give away that I knew she was terrified. The man continued that she'd been off her meds. She'd wandered off from their property and that he'd been looking for her for hours. He told me that he appreciated me stopping, but that he could handle it from here. Inside the car, I could hear the woman talking to herself in this pleading tone. She was terrified of him. I told the guy that I would feel most comfortable bringing her to the hospital myself, and that if he wanted to reunite with her there, that made the most sense to me. Then there was a silence between us. His whole body seemed super tense, like he was considering his next move. I yanked my door open and threw myself inside, slamming the locks down. He took a step forward, but I gunned it backwards, spinning the car around. Then I floored it. In the mirror, I saw him just standing there, watching. Then I saw his headlights start moving. He was following us. The woman was curled up in the passenger seat, whispering over and over, telling me not to stop. For miles, the guy stayed behind us. Never too close, never trying to run me off the road or anything, just following. Then, just as we got close to town, he veered off onto some side road and disappeared. At the hospital, the staff called the police. I stayed with her until they took her into emergency care. When the police arrived, I told them everything I could. A week later, they called me back to give another statement, and I asked them what had happened. They wouldn't tell me anything, just thanked me for my time. I never heard another word about it, and I'll never know if that man ever found her again. I had been out hiking that day, just a solo trek to clear my head. I was just getting back to my car when I saw the cluster of emergency vehicles in the parking lot. I overheard enough to put it together. A little girl had gone missing on the trail. She had been walking behind her parents one minute and gone the next. No sound, no struggle, just gone. They were asking for volunteers, anyone who knew the trails. I stepped up. I was handed a flashlight and given a section of woods to cover, along with a handful of others. They described the girl and what she was wearing. They told us to stay within earshot, call out her name, and look for anything that could be connected. We had maybe an hour of daylight left. I don't know how long I was out there before I saw the shoe. Small, pink, half buried in leaves. I started to get this morbid sense of panic in my gut. I hadn't even realized how far away from everyone else I had gotten. I looked around and saw faint indentations in the dirt, a set of adult footprints and then another set of smaller ones. I stepped deeper off the main trail. I followed this little path till I reached a sort of clearing, just a break in the dense tree cover. She was there. She was just sitting there on a rock. She wasn't crying, wasn't calling for help. She just stared at me with wide, blank eyes. I crouched down, told her I was here to help and that we needed to go back to her parents. She shook her head and told me she wasn't supposed to talk to anyone. I told her she was okay and that her parents had asked me to look for her. She hesitated and then whispered to me that, quote, he told her not to move and that he'd come back. It felt like all the blood in my body went cold in an instant. She reached for me and I scooped her up, ready to bolt back to the trail. Then, footsteps behind us, close. I turned my head and saw a man standing between the trees. He didn't move, didn't speak, just watching. I couldn't see his face, just his outline. Then I ran. My legs started to burn, but I didn't stop, not until I saw the glow of flashlight beams ahead. The others ran toward me and I nearly collapsed as they took the girl from my arms. I immediately got the police involved, but I couldn't tell them much. I hadn't seen the guy's face, I hadn't even heard him speak. They searched the area, but found nothing. The girl was safe, she was back with her parents, and that's what mattered. But I knew what I had seen. And I knew, somewhere out there, that the man that tried to take her was still watching. I didn't remember what happened at first, just waking up in the hospital. I didn't even know how long I'd been there, or why I felt like I'd been hit by a truck. A nurse came in when she saw me stirring and asked how I was feeling. She explained something along the lines of there being a couple police officers who wanted to speak with me. They asked me what I remembered. I didn't get the impression that I'd been in the hospital for very long, but I had no idea how I got there. And I certainly didn't understand why police would be involved in the conversation. They went on to explain that I'd been attacked and that they thought it was a case of mistaken identity. Evidently, somebody or some people thought that I was this other person, so they beat the hell out of me and left me for dead. If some passerby hadn't spotted me in the parking lot where they left me, I wouldn't have even made it to the hospital alive. They were hoping my memory would come back so I could help them identify who it was. That's when they showed me the article. I was in the news. Man brutally attacked, found barely alive. The thing that got me though was what the cops told me next. Because of the news article, it was possible that whoever had done this to me was now aware that I had survived and could possibly identify them. I still couldn't remember anything, but now I wasn't sure if I even wanted to. I spent the next couple days in that hospital bed, barely moving. The pain meds kept me in and out, but every time I dozed off, I'd wake up in a panic. I kept thinking about that article, about what the cops said. If these people thought I was dead, then found out I wasn't, what were they going to do about it? The third night, I was laying there, half asleep, when I heard voices outside my room. Someone was speaking to a nurse. A woman. She said something about being someone's sister. By the sound and proximity of it, I assumed she was talking about me. I went totally still. I don't have a sister. I'm an only child, and both parents had passed away at that point in my life. But that voice was familiar. Then it hit me. It was the last thing I remembered before waking up in the hospital bed. I just laid there, listening. Then I heard a creak. I couldn't turn my head to see, could barely move at all, so I called out to see if it was a nurse, but there was no reply. Then I heard footsteps, soft and coming closer. There was a rustling sound, like fabric or a pillow shifting. Then I was plunged into total darkness and something was covering my face, making it hard to breathe. At first, it was soft, almost careful, but then it got heavier, harder, like someone was putting all their weight on my head. I could not breathe at all at this point. I couldn't fight, couldn't push back. I struggled, barely able to move. Then, loud, shrill alarms. The machines I was hooked up to were losing it. My heart rate must have spiked, something must have triggered them. The pressure lifted, footsteps scuffled away. Then I heard the door fly open and people started screaming and yelling. It was a chaotic outburst of multiple people yelling, hollering, and scuffling. Heard someone trying to make excuses, the same woman I had heard outside the door to my room. She told them she was just checking on me, saying she thought that I needed help. Security grabbed her and the police were called. Turns out they had already had her on the suspect list. I still don't remember everything about the attack. Maybe I never will. But I know this, I wasn't supposed to survive that night in the parking lot. And I definitely wasn't supposed to survive the hospital. But somehow, I did.